If you're a sysadmin looking at DevOps, you probably already know the questions. How big is the gap? How long is this going to take? Is it even worth it, or am I stuck being a sysadmin forever? Every roadmap that you've pulled up kind of implies the same answer. There's like 15 different tools, you're estimating it's going to take you 2 years, and there's nothing that you already know that carries over with you. But your week says otherwise. You're running servers, you're writing scripts, and you're on call for all of it, which is already the load-bearing half of DevOps work. What you're actually missing is a short list of wrappers. I crossed this exact gap myself from ops side into 8 years of DevOps and SRE, and I built a map. Over the next few minutes, we're going to fill it out. There's 5 areas that carry over and a short list of things that don't. You're not starting over. Okay, let me draw you something I'm calling the pre-prod pentagon. Not because you've not worked in prod before, but because you're pre-production for DevOps work specifically. The first area of the pentagon that maps over, I'm going to call admin. So we've got that here. I would consider this things like checking services, you're checking storage, you're restarting services, you're making sure things are actually running, you're doing backups maybe. Just the sort of thing that you need to do to keep the lights on. The second area is building. So this is more infrastructure building that I'm thinking of. So things like firewalls, switches, maybe it's bare metal, and it might even be an MDF build out where you're doing cabling and that sort of stuff. You understand the underlying architecture there. And there's a reason I didn't include VMs there, because this is a separate vertex here where you're doing virtualization. This is going to be vSphere, Hyper-V, snapshots, and images, sort of scripting here. So if you're in Windows, like coming from Windows like I did, this will probably be PowerShell. Oops. PowerShell. If you're already in Linux, we're talking Bash. You may even be doing some Python here, but this is how you're running your automated jobs. You've got some tasks that you're doing that you wanted to make a little bit easier to run every single time and not have to remember all the steps if you're like me. And under all of this, if you're trying to keep the lights on, you know we have to do change control and cab approvals. So this is the underlying thing. You know, you have to make a plan, you've got to have a rollback, you've got to have a backup plan, you've got to have exact steps of what the changes you're going to make. And this is something that comes along with being a sysadmin. There's one area left, and I know it's probably empty because mine definitely was, and that is the visibility here. Where does the work actually show up outside the company? For most sysadmins, the answer is nowhere. You've been doing it for years, you just haven't been updating anything that shows you can do that kind of work. We're technical people, we want to avoid self-promotion, but it's something you need to do. That's the area we have to light up if you're trying to make this transition. So how does this map onto what I'm calling the prod pentagon? Again, for prod DevOps type of work. On the admin type of work here, I consider these DevOps fundamentals, and there's really here 2 items. You need Linux and you need Git. For the build section, you don't necessarily want to be clicking around inside the Azure or AWS or GCP portals. So here, this maps onto IAC. So this is infrastructure as code, and these are things like Terraform or CloudFormation or Bicep. And this is why the virtualization is a separate area. For this corner here, we've got containers and orchestration. Ooh, that's a long word. So this is looking at Docker and K8s for Kubernetes. This is the concepts for virtualization map almost directly onto containers with different mechanics underneath for sure. Lastly, you may already be running some of your scripts using cron jobs or that sort of thing, but CI/CD pipelines are wrapping those for the purpose of building software here. We're talking GitHub Actions, Jenkins, GitLab. These are the sorts of things that are going to automate a lot of the work for you. Lastly, of course, visibility maps right onto the same thing because you'll never be able to show the work and get into the interviews for these DevOps positions without also self-promoting. And underneath it all, just like we were using change control and approval boards to manage the actual changes in the environment, you're going to be doing the same thing here. But in the place of change controls here, you're also going to be using Git. Same as from the fundamentals. That's why it's in my fundamentals here. A lot of the same change control methodologies you're using are available in Git because all of this stuff, your CI/CD pipelines, your Kubernetes manifest, your Docker file, your Terraform, all of that is going to be stored in Git as well. Surrounding all of your work is the mission that you're trying to do, which is to actually keep the lights on. As a sysadmin, you're already bringing that discipline with you. You've been keeping the lights on, you've been making change controls, you're making sure stuff doesn't break as you're working on it. DevOps adds one more thing on top of it. The software that the business ships has to ship safer and faster as you go. That's the purpose of this entire pentagon here. That additional layer of shipping the software actually changes where you sit as an engineer. Most of the time, IT work was never tied to the actual revenue of the company. In DevOps, every new version that ships makes the company money, and you're the one that's making that happen. When you're closer to the product, you're closer to the money, and that's why you get paid more and you're worth more as an engineer. Let's talk about how to actually use this map. I'm going to give you 3 examples of coworkers that I've had in the past and how they sit on the pre-prod pentagon here. First guy, let's call him John. He'd been working in IT for quite a long time, and when he came in, he was actually the one who got me scripting in PowerShell and Bash and Python. So that transfers over immediately for him. He'd also been working in Hyper-V and VMware for quite a long time, so it was even advanced for me at the time. Those 2 areas were his strengths. Of course, he had some admin here, and of course, he had a lot of everything because most sysadmins are generalists. But this gives you an idea that a lot of this, 80% of the scripting carries over into the CI/CD, 80% of the virtualization carries into containerization. Another example, had a friend, an old coworker who had been working in sales and technical sales specifically. So he was working in a storage company at the time. His storage, the build portion of his work was very, very strong. He came up to speed on networking very, very quickly. Also really good at virtualization, was able to pick that up, and of course had decent amount of admin type of work as you do. Last coworker, as an example, came in transitioning from the construction industry, had been working somewhat technical roles, but more customer support, and was great on the admin side of things, but was missing quite a bit when it came to the rest of this. But his visibility was good enough to get him hired into an MSP. So this is an advantage here, and honestly, I think one of the larger advantages that you can have. Nobody is exactly these 3 people. Even I had my own strengths. I definitely was much better on the build side of things, the virtualization side of things, and I'd spent some time doing scripting. But my Linux was really weak. I didn't understand Git at all. The visibility was really weak, like I mentioned earlier. This gives you a way to figure out where your gaps are and how quickly you can close them. It was easy for me to get into the CI/CD, to get into the containers and orchestration, to pick up with Terraform and IAC. I already had 60 to 80% of those skills. I just needed to close them just a little bit. So let's talk about how it actually feels to close these gaps. It's not going to be easy, and I'm going to tell you the story about how I really got started. Back in 2018, I was so fed up with my work at the time, I actually asked my wife permission to go find a new job because it kind of throws the whole family into chaos, right? And what I got permission for was 1 hour a day, just before dinner and after I got home from work. So I started leaving work about 30 minutes early so I could make the 45-minute or hour-long commute home and then have that hour to actually try to study, job hunt, update my resume, do all the things you need to do. It was not easy at all. And the reality is that I'd say probably 3 out of the 5 days of the week, maybe 2 out of the 5 days, I would fall asleep during that time because I was just so exhausted from everything I was trying to manage with life and kids and work and all of that stuff. This is not going to be an easy task, but I also didn't have this map at the time. I was winging it, just trying to figure it out as I went. If I'd had something like this, it would have given me much more direction on what I was trying to figure out and how to get there instead of meandering into hacker courses and Udemy courses and all sorts of other things like Family Circus all over the place. Change requests, execution steps, rollback plans, all of that stuff carries over with you into DevOps work. It's not thrown out, it's just got different wrappers around it for you to use. You're not starting from zero here. You've already been doing this for years. If you're like me, this list is actually the fun part. Learning new technologies has always been the fun part for me. These are the puzzles you got into IT for. They're different pieces, but the troubleshooting brain that actually got you into this now has a new game to play with new pieces. Now, in 2026, you have an advantage that I never had. You can use AI to ask you questions about what your current experience is and how that maps onto this prod pentagon. You just have to give the information about what your current knowledge base is, what your current skill set is, and then tell it this is the gap that I'm trying to get to. Here's the end goal. How do I fill that gap in between? Of course, you still have to do the work, right? Like, you're never going to get the experience and really let it sink into your bones until you do the manual labor and get the repetitions in to make it muscle memory. But you could speed up the course of time. It took me 2 years to actually get into my first DevOps job. I started studying for an AWS cert in 2016. You can shortcut that if you just give the AI the right information and find the diff. So, quick recap, your week probably already looks like this. You're doing administrative work on servers and backups and storage and other things that you need to keep track of. You may be building some sort of infrastructure, firewall, switches. You may be virtualizing things, hyperware, VMware, snapshots, images. And you may be scripting, Bash, Python, PowerShell. These things map directly onto the fundamentals of Linux and Git. IAC for building, which is Terraform and CloudFormation. Your virtualization maps into containers and Dockerization, and scripting maps directly into CI/CD and automatically running these things. You already own so much of this work, you just gotta fill the little gaps in between. If you've been struggling trying to figure out what that hazy space in between is, put it in the comments. I'm reading all of them. I'll respond to every single one. Tell me what your background is, tell me what you do or don't know, and we'll try to figure it out. I have a video on the prod pentagon, the outside of this with the fundamentals, IAC, containers, CI/CD, and visibility. You can watch that here. Thank you so much for watching to the end, and I'll see you in the next one.